"Get off him, lady. He don't need your charity." The shout sliced through the wet night like a blade. Tires screeched. A man lay sprawled beside his motorcycle, chrome still spinning, gas hissing from a broken line. The street outside Marley's diner flickered in neon red and blue, half diner sign, half chaos. Naomi Reed didn't flinch. She still held her coffee, the steam curling up through the cold Chicago air. Her eyes didn't leave the man on the ground. He was bleeding from the shoulder, trying to push himself upright. Around him, 3 bikers circled, leather jackets gleaming under the streetlights like armor. "Ma'am," one sneered, stepping closer, "you don't belong in this part of town." Another laughed. "Fancy coat like that? Must have got lost leaving the suburbs." Naomi knelt anyway, placing her cup beside the curb, steady hands pressing a napkin to the biker's wound. Her voice was calm, barely above a whisper. "Hold still. You'll make it worse." The tallest one kicked a trash can, metal echoing down the block. "I said step away. We take care of our own." He grabbed her wrist, fast, aggressive. For 1 tense second, every head on the sidewalk turned. A waitress behind the diner window froze, phone half raised. Naomi looked up, eyes steady, unafraid. "You take care of him," she said quietly, "like you just did?" He released her. Not from guilt, from confusion. She didn't sound scared. She sounded like someone giving an order. Across the street, a group of late-night customers had stopped mid-step. Phones out, recording. Rain began to fall, soft, then heavy, mixing with the gasoline shimmer on the asphalt. The diner's flickering sign read closed, but the moment was wide open. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi Reed. The biker coughed, voice raspy. "Thanks. Didn't think anyone would stop." Naomi nodded once. "I've seen too many people pass by." Behind her, the leader of the gang spat onto the pavement. "You trying to play hero?" he barked. She stood, eyes locked on him. "No," she said. "Just cleaning up in front of my diner." That single word hung in the air like thunder waiting to strike. The men didn't catch it yet, but in 15 minutes, they'd understand exactly whose ground they were standing on. The siren faded into the distance. No cops yet, just the low hum of engines and the faint buzz of the diner's dying neon. Naomi Reed stood by the curb, coat damp, coffee spilled, the steam of the city rising like ghosts from the asphalt. Inside the diner, lights glowed warm and golden, the kind of warmth she built this place for, back when Marley's was just a dream drawn on a napkin and a late-night promise to herself. Tonight, it was closed for renovation, but she still came back every week. Same block, same window seat, same reminder of where she started. The biker she'd helped, mid-40s, rough voice, patched jacket, tried to stand. She offered her hand again. He hesitated. "You don't got to touch me. I'm fine." Naomi smiled faintly. "You're bleeding through your sleeve. That's not fine." The leader, Vance, took a step closer. His boots splashed through a puddle, scattering reflection into chaos. "You some kind of social worker?" he asked. "No," she said simply. "Then why risk it?" She looked at him, eyes calm but sharp. "Because this block has my name on it." He laughed, slow and condescending. "Lady, this street belongs to nobody, especially not you." Naomi didn't answer. She turned to the fallen man again. The diner's window cast her reflection beside his, a woman in her 30s, clean lines, steady breath, the kind of composure that comes from boardrooms, not back streets. Rico, the young waiter inside, whispered to his co-worker, "She looks familiar." "Who is she?" "Not sure, but she's not just some random customer." Naomi wiped the blood from the biker's knuckles with a folded napkin like she'd done it 1,000 times. "What's your name?" "Lenny," he muttered. "Didn't mean to crash. The oil spill." "I saw it," she replied. "Not your fault." Vance crossed his arms. "You done playing nurse? We got it from here." She didn't look up. "He needs stitches, not attitude." He grinned, flashing a chipped tooth. "You talk like you own the place." Naomi's tone didn't change. "Maybe I do." The words slid under his skin. He stepped forward again, too close. Inside, Rico instinctively reached for his phone. His co-worker hissed. "Don't. She told us. No recordings inside." Rico hesitated, whispering, "Then why's she out there?" Naomi rose slowly. "If you want to help him," she said, "you'll listen. If not, you'll move." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. The rain grew heavier, pounding the awning, streaking the chrome of the bikes. Vance smirked, wiping his face. "Lady, you think this is your movie?" She looked him dead in the eye. "No, this is my street." He laughed again, walking away, but the laugh sounded thinner this time, because something about her, the stillness, the certainty, didn't fit. Behind the fogged diner glass, Rico watched as Naomi reached for the door handle. For a second, the neon flickered to life again, reflecting Marley's diner across her face. He whispered, "Wait, Marley Reed. That's her. That's Naomi Reed." The room went quiet. Outside, the gang still thought they were in control, but the woman they were mocking had just stepped back into the very empire they'd trespassed on. And the night, calm, electric, waiting, was about to change forever. The sound of the diner door closing behind her was soft, but outside, the night had already turned sharp. The air smelled of burnt oil and adrenaline. The gang had regrouped, boots scraping the pavement as if marking territory. Vance spat on the ground, pacing slow circles around his fallen friend. "You got some nerve, walking out here like you run the place." Naomi didn't bother answering. She moved past him, unlocked the diner door again, and flipped the sign from closed to open. The gesture was small, but it felt like a challenge. Inside, Rico froze. "She just opened the door," he whispered. His co-worker shook her head. "She's out of her mind." Naomi looked back at Vance, her voice even. "If he's hurt, he can wait inside till help comes. You too, if you plan to act human." One of the bikers, a stocky man with a scar cutting across his jaw, chuckled darkly. "We don't take orders from women with fancy coats." He flicked his cigarette at her feet. Sparks danced on the wet concrete. Naomi stepped aside, letting it burn out. "Then take one from the weather," she said quietly. "Rain doesn't care who you are either." That calmness made them uneasy. Bullies expected fear, not composure. Vance looked over his shoulder, scanning the diner's glowing windows. "You think hiding behind your little shop makes you tough?" Naomi's gaze followed his, to the walls she'd built years ago, the chrome stools she'd chosen herself, the smell of old coffee and stories that had paid for everything she owned now. "This place isn't for hiding," she said softly. "It's for belonging." That line made Rico glance up, goosebumps racing his arms. He'd heard that quote before, printed on every Reed & Co. employee handbook. Outside, the laughter faded. Vance snorted, pretending not to notice. "Belonging, huh? Cute word. Let me show you how much you belong here." He grabbed a chair from the patio, an old steel one she'd bought at an auction, and slammed it against the wall. Glass shattered across the sidewalk. Naomi didn't flinch, but the sound drew attention. A rideshare driver stopped across the street. A couple walking their dog froze mid-step. The city had witnesses now. Rico finally pulled out his phone, whispering, "I can't just stand here." His co-worker hissed, "You'll get fired." "She saved my brother last month when he got laid off. She gave him a job. I'm not letting her face this alone." He started recording. The red light blinked through the rain. Naomi's voice cut through the tension like tempered steel. "You done proving your point?" Vance sneered. "Not yet." He kicked the broken chair aside and gestured at the neon sign overhead. "This dump doesn't even light right." He reached up and yanked the power cord loose. The Marley's diner glow snapped off, leaving only the red haze of streetlights. Naomi's reflection vanished from the glass. For a moment it was just her silhouette, still, dark, unbothered. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "You just vandalized the one place in this city that feeds you when you're broke." Vance blinked. "What?" Naomi took a step closer. "You heard me." Her coat dripped rain, but her stare was steady. "Half your crew eats here every Thursday night. You think I don't recognize faces?" The scarred man's smirk faltered. Behind him, the injured biker muttered weakly, "She's telling the truth, Vance. This is that place, the free meal nights." Naomi turned slightly, her voice almost a whisper but heavy with finality. "You keep talking about who belongs. Maybe start with yourself." Then she picked up her phone and dialed a single number. "Jordan," she said, eyes never leaving the men in front of her. "Activate code Diner." Her tone wasn't a threat. It was a countdown. And as the streetlights flickered again, Rico whispered into his camera, "They just messed with the wrong woman." Rain blurred the street into silver veins. Neon reflections ran down the puddles like nerves exposed. The bikers stood tense, half ready to fight, half confused why the woman in front of them refused to react. Naomi Reed didn't raise her voice. She didn't step back either. Her silence filled the street heavier than any threat. She just placed her phone face down on the counter by the diner door, screen still glowing, call still active. "Lady," Vance muttered, shaking his head, "you think you can scare us with that little phone trick?" Naomi looked at him the way surgeons look at broken things, not angry, just already planning the repair. "I'm not here to scare anyone," she said. "I'm here to make sure everyone gets home alive." That answer disarmed him more than a shout would have. Behind the cracked window, Rico whispered, "She's not even blinking." His co-worker, eyes wide, murmured, "That's not fear, that's control." Vance barked a short laugh, trying to recover dominance. "You got guts, I'll give you that, but you're outnumbered." Naomi's reply was soft. "Numbers don't change truth." He frowned. Something about that sentence felt too precise, too rehearsed, like it belonged in a place where people wore suits and gave orders. He didn't know that at that exact moment, 5 city cameras within 3 blocks had just rerouted their feeds to Reed & Co. Security HQ. The injured biker, Lenny, tried to stand again, groaning. Naomi reached out a hand to steady him. "Easy," she said quietly. "Help's coming." He looked up at her, confusion cutting through pain. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Naomi's eyes softened for the first time. "Because someone once helped me when nobody else did." The words hit different. Even Vance hesitated, but pride dies slower than conscience. "Don't act like you're some saint," he snapped. "You don't belong on this block. Not with that watch, not with that car." Naomi glanced at her parked sedan, black, unbranded, modest, then back at him. "You see what you want to see." He stepped closer, testing her. "You keep talking like you run this place." She tilted her head slightly. "Because I do." The rain intensified. The street seemed to pulse with it. The onlookers across the road huddled under awnings, whispering. One woman in a red coat lifted her phone to record. Naomi finally turned away from Vance, pushing open the diner door. The bell above it chimed faintly. She spoke over her shoulder, voice steady, eyes calm. "Get your man out of the street. Leave the rest alone." Vance smirked. "Or what?" Naomi didn't look back. "Or you'll find out why this block's quiet after midnight." She stepped inside. The warmth of the diner swallowed her silhouette. For a second, only the neon glow and the rain kept her shape alive. Inside, Rico rushed forward. "Ma'am, Miss Reed, should we call the police?" Naomi shook her head slowly. "Already done," he blinked. "You called them?" "No," she said, picking up her phone again. "They called me." A beat. Then Jordan's voice crackled faintly from the speaker. "Security en route. Local law enforcement briefed. Media lines watching." Naomi turned the phone face down again, calm as glass. "Thank you." Outside, Vance's laughter sounded thinner now. "You think a phone call makes you a boss?" Naomi's reply was quiet, but sharp enough to slice the rain. "No. Choices do." She walked behind the counter, touched the cracked window frame gently, then whispered to herself, "They always break the glass before they break themselves." And for a moment, before anything else happened, the world seemed to pause. The city holding its breath, waiting for what the calm woman in the diner would do next. The world started to watch. Phones rose like a quiet forest of glass across the street. The hum of curiosity turned into the low murmur of collective disbelief. Someone whispered, "She's not even yelling." Another replied, "That's what makes it scary." Inside the diner, Rico hovered near the counter, torn between duty and awe. He'd worked here 6 months, never seen a CEO in person. Definitely not one who looked like her, drenched in rain, eyes calm enough to level a storm. Naomi Reed stood by the broken window, watching her reflection flicker in the shards. Behind her, the coffee machines hissed like distant applause. She wasn't hiding. She was timing. Across the street, the rideshare driver started recording again, framing her against the shattered glass and neon. "Yo," he whispered to his live stream, "this lady just faced down 3 bikers and didn't even blink. If this turns bad, it's on tape." Rico's co-worker, a college intern named Danny, chewed her lip. "We should call corporate." Rico glanced at Naomi's phone on the counter, still lit, still on a live call. "Corporate already knows," he muttered. Vance paced outside, checking the small crowd forming on the sidewalk. A couple of bystanders stepped closer to the curb, filming the gang. "Delete that," he barked. A man in a hoodie shot back. Public street, bro. You don't own it. The words stung. Because for the first time, Vance realized maybe he didn't own this moment at all. Naomi stepped out again, umbrella in hand now, but she didn't open it. The rain matted her curls against her face, catching the diner light like threads of gold. "You should take your friend and go," she said softly. The scarred biker snarled. "You think this is over? You don't get to boss us around." Naomi's reply came slow, steady. "I didn't say I was the boss." She pointed to the crowd gathering behind them. They did. Vance turned. Half the street had phones out now, flashlights cutting through the rain, dozens of witnesses. Rico stepped out from the diner door, voice shaking but clear. "Ma'am, the live stream's already trending. Marley's diner is blowing up." Naomi nodded, calm as ever. "Let them see." A bystander, a woman in a trench coat, shouted from across the street, "Why are you threatening her? She helped your friend." Another voice chimed in, "You break her window and still act tough." Vance spun, frustrated. "Stay out of this." Naomi's tone turned steel. "They can't. Not anymore." Her phone buzzed on the counter inside. Jordan's voice filtered through the rain. "Media alert confirmed. Local Channel 4 has eyes on your feed." Naomi didn't even look back. "Good," she said. "They'll want the full story." The scarred biker stepped toward her again. "Lady, you got too many people talking. You think the internet scares me?" Naomi took a small step forward, closing the space between them. "No," she said, "but truth usually does." The crowd murmured. That sentence hit like a match in gasoline. Vance clenched his fists. "You don't know who you're talking to." Naomi didn't blink. "Neither do you." Rico's camera caught it all. Her posture, her poise, her total refusal to break. Behind her, the diner's sign flickered weakly, trying to stay alive. Inside, Danny whispered, "This is going to blow up online. People will see this and remember her name." Rico didn't take his eyes off Naomi. "They already will," he said. Because at that moment, she wasn't just a woman in a diner. She was a symbol in motion, calm, drenched, unstoppable. And outside, the witnesses kept filming, unaware that in less than 10 minutes, the same woman they thought was defending a stranger would reveal she owned every inch of the ground they stood on. Thunder rolled above the diner, deep and angry. Rain hit the tin awning like applause from ghosts who had seen this scene before. A woman standing alone, being tested for her right to exist where she stood. Headlights cut through the mist. A fourth bike pulled up. Bigger, black chrome, its engine growling even after the key turned off. The man who stepped off it was heavier, older, his presence enough to silence the street. His name was Brick Lawson, leader of the South Line Riders and the one Vance actually answered to. He scanned the crowd, the phones, the broken glass. "What the hell's going on here?" Vance pointed immediately. "She started it, some lady messing with us." Brick turned, gaze landing on Naomi. "You touch one of mine?" Naomi didn't move. I stopped one of yours from bleeding out. You're welcome." Brick's eyes narrowed. "You calling me ungrateful?" "No," she said calmly. "I'm calling you late." A low ripple of surprise moved through the onlookers. Naomi's tone didn't have a tremor, only precision. Brick stepped closer until his boots were inches from hers. "You got mouth for someone standing in the rain with no backup." Naomi folded her hands loosely in front of her. "I don't need backup. I have witnesses." The crowd's cameras glowed brighter. Someone whispered, "She's fearless." Another muttered, "Or crazy." Brick looked around, annoyed. "Put those phones down before someone gets hurt." Naomi's voice cut through his command. "They already are." He frowned. "Excuse me?" She nodded toward the injured biker still sitting by the curb, wrapped in a diner towel. "Your people, hurt by pride, not punches." Vance snapped. "Enough of this sermon crap." He turned to Rico, who was filming again. "Turn that off or I'll—" Naomi's voice came first, low but sharp. "He works for me." Vance froze. "What?" She stepped slightly in front of Rico, shielding him without breaking eye contact. "You threaten my staff, you threaten me." Brick laughed, a dry, skeptical sound. "Your staff, you own this dump?" Naomi tilted her head, half smile, half challenge. "Something like that." Brick gestured toward the broken window. "Looks like you need better insurance." Naomi's gaze flicked to the shards on the sidewalk. "Oh, I have the best coverage. It starts with accountability." Her phone buzzed again. She didn't even glance. Brick's voice dropped low. "Lady, you got about 5 seconds before I stop being polite." Naomi stepped closer, close enough for her words to hit without echo. "Polite left when you pulled up." That line landed like a gavel. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was tension crystallized. The onlookers were still filming. Even the rain seemed to wait for what came next. Brick's face hardened. "You think this street's yours?" Naomi nodded once. "I don't think. I built it." Vance barked a laugh, desperate to shatter the spell. "You? Please. You're just some rich tourist playing hero in a bad neighborhood." Naomi's voice stayed level. "You call it a bad neighborhood because you never tried to change it. That struck something." Even Lenny, the injured biker, muttered weakly, "She's right, man." Vance spun, furious. "Shut up!" Naomi's gaze didn't leave him. "That's what men like you do best. You shout to stay tall." Brick exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You got a lot of nerve, lady." She met his eyes. "No, I've got proof." And then, quietly, she tapped her phone screen once. The diner's lights flickered back on. Every bulb, every neon letter. A ripple of white light flooded the street, revealing the logo above the door. Marley's Diner, a Reed & Co. establishment. Phones caught it instantly. Gasps echoed across the sidewalk. Brick turned, reading the sign, realization dawning slow and painful. Vance's mouth fell open. Naomi just said, almost softly, "Now you know whose ground you're standing on." The storm hadn't even peaked yet, but justice, quiet, patient, inevitable, had just entered the room. The truth hit them harder than the rain. For a few seconds, nobody spoke, only the hiss of the storm and the flicker of the diner's neon returning to life. Then Vance broke the silence with a dry laugh that sounded more like panic. "So what?" he spat. "You own a building. You think that makes you untouchable?" Naomi didn't answer. She simply turned the open sign back to closed again. The motion was quiet, deliberate, a boundary drawn in glass. Brick looked around, jaw tight. "Everybody put your damn phones down." No one did. The crowd had grown. More cars stopped at the corner, lights reflecting off wet pavement. The city itself seemed to lean in. Vance kicked at a chair, sending it skidding into the street. "You think you can embarrass us, huh?" He reached up, grabbed the broken neon tube, and ripped it down. It shattered against the sidewalk in a spray of sparks. The gasp that followed came not from fear, but disbelief. He'd just destroyed the name still glowing on the sign, Reed & Co. Naomi's expression didn't shift. She stepped forward past the glass shards, her heels cutting clean through the reflection. "Every letter you break," she said evenly, "costs you one more chance to walk away." Brick's tone hardened. "Watch it, lady." Naomi turned her head slightly. "You first." It wasn't loud, but it sliced through him. Then it happened, fast and ugly. Vance shoved one of the chrome stools off the patio. It hit the window again, this time cracking straight through the logo. The rain made the sound hiss. Rico flinched, phone still filming. Oh my God, they're really doing it. Naomi didn't move. Her fingers hovered just above her phone screen. Vance shouted, "Go ahead, call your lawyers, your cops, whoever you want. We're not scared." Naomi's voice came out calm, measured. "Good, because fear isn't required, just consequence." She tapped the phone once. Across the street, a black SUV rolled forward from the shadows. Two more stopped at the intersection. Headlights beamed directly onto the scene. Brick stepped back instinctively. Who the hell? From the first SUV, a tall man in a grey suit stepped out, umbrella in hand. Jordan Wells, Reed & Co. Corporate Security Director. His tone was polite, but his eyes were razor-sharp. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, "you are trespassing on private commercial property under active damage review. I'd advise you to leave before local law enforcement finishes crossing the block." Vance's mouth twitched. "She called security?" Jordan smiled faintly. "No. She owns security." Phones kept filming. The livestream count ticked higher. Comments flashed across screens. "She's the CEO. They're done. Don't mess with her." Naomi finally spoke, her voice carrying through the rain. "You've had your say. You've thrown your tantrum. Now let's see how you handle the bill." She walked closer to the cracked sign, tracing the last glowing letter with her finger. "Every repair, every replacement, every second you spent proving your point. It's all recorded." Then she looked up at Vance. "And so are you." He glanced around. 3 different phones had red lights flashing at him. Even the injured biker Lenny was watching silently, shame washing across his face. Brick exhaled, jaw clenching. "You called the cops, didn't you?" Naomi didn't blink. "I didn't have to. They're my tenants." A distant siren wailed closer, weaving through traffic. The rain kept falling, heavy and merciless, washing the dust and arrogance off the street. Naomi turned slightly toward Rico. "Step back, please." He obeyed immediately. Then she looked back at Vance, soaked, furious, suddenly smaller under the fluorescent light. "This was never about a fight," she said. "It was about a mirror. You just didn't like what you saw." The siren grew louder, and for the first time all night, none of the bikers had anything left to say. The siren drew nearer, folding into the sound of rain and restless murmurs. Naomi Reed stood still amid the wreckage, one hand at her side, the other resting on the phone she hadn't yet put away. Around her, the neon shards glowed faintly, tiny constellations in a puddle. She pressed her thumb to the screen. "Jordan," she said, calm as ever. "Begin internal documentation. Code Marley active." The suited man straightened instantly. "Understood." He gestured to two agents stepping out from the SUVs. They moved without words, scanning the perimeter, filming every inch of damage with body cams. Brick frowned. "What's this? You got some tech circus running out of your diner?" Jordan didn't even look at him. "Damage assessment and data capture. Standard corporate protocol." Naomi walked slowly to the broken window, tracing her fingertips across the splintered glass. Her reflection split into fragments. One for every time someone had assumed she didn't belong somewhere. She turned slightly toward the crowd. "For anyone recording," she said, voice steady, "make sure you tag it right. Not a brawl, not a stunt. Just another night someone tested the wrong person's patience." The rain hit harder now, making her words sound like they were being written in water. Brick tried to reassert control, squaring his shoulders. "You can't pull some company act and think it fixes everything." Naomi faced him fully, eyes sharp. "It doesn't fix, it records." Jordan tapped his earpiece. Live data stream confirmed. Local authorities synced. A faint chime echoed from Naomi's phone. The Reed & Co. logo glowed, sleek, white, official. Vance scoffed. "You got an app for justice now?" Naomi's reply came like a blade through silk. "Justice doesn't need an app. It just needs witnesses." Rico, still standing near the doorway, whispered, "It's like she's running an entire operation from one phone." Danny answered softly, "She is the operation." Naomi turned back to the gang. "Before you say another word, understand this. Every sentence you speak from now on is logged, time-stamped, and backed up to 3 servers." Vance looked uneasy. "That's illegal." "No," she said. "It's corporate policy. You're standing on private property owned by a publicly traded company." Brick exhaled sharply, realization cutting through his bluster. "You set us up." Naomi's expression softened, but not kindly. "No, you walked in. I just turned the lights on." Jordan's radio crackled, a distant dispatcher confirming police ETA. He nodded at Naomi. 2 minutes out." "Good," she said. "Let them find everything ready." Rico stepped forward hesitantly. "Miss Reed, do you want me to lock the doors?" She shook her head. "Leave them open. The truth should always have a way in." That line hit the crowd like scripture. Phones tilted upward, catching the glow of the diner lights behind her, haloed against the night. Brick rubbed his jaw, trying to recover some footing. "You think this little show makes you powerful?" Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "Power isn't the show. It's the silence that follows." Behind her, Jordan nodded to his team. "Log complete." "Thank you," she replied. Then she turned back to the 3 bikers. "Now, since you broke my sign, I'll let you fix something else." Vance sneered. "And what's that?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Your record." Brick blinked, confused. "What?" She lifted her phone again. "I'm sending your names to our hiring partners across the district. Every bar, every warehouse, every repair shop you've worked with. Consider it a courtesy notice." Vance's grin faded. "You can't do that." Naomi's tone dropped colder. "I just did." The sound of approaching sirens filled the pause that followed. The street shimmered in red and blue once more, the color of accountability. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at the men who had called her lady, like it meant less, and said quietly, "Protocol complete." And just like that, she'd turned humiliation into evidence, and evidence into power. The first flash of police lights streaked across the diner's windows like a warning flare. The crowd parted as 2 cruisers rolled up, their sirens tapering into silence. The rain slowed to a drizzle, as if the storm itself wanted to watch. Naomi Reed didn't step back. She stood exactly where she had all night, between the wreckage and the people who made it. One of the officers, a woman with a soaked patrol cap, approached. "Ma'am, Are you the owner or the manager here? Naomi met her eyes. Both, she said, and handed over a card, black embossed with silver lettering. The officer read it, blinked once, then twice. Naomi J. Reed, founder and CEO, Reed & Co. Hospitality Group. The officer straightened slightly. Ma'am, I didn't realize. Naomi's tone was calm, unbothered. Most people don't, until they have to. Behind her, Vance froze mid-step. Wait, you're serious? She turned toward him slowly, rain dripping from her coat sleeve. You called me lady, outsider, charity case. But this diner, she gestured around them, was my first property. Built it 10 years ago with a borrowed credit card and 2 a.m. dishwashing shifts. The crowd murmured, phones raised higher. Someone whispered, she's the CEO. She owns all of them. Naomi kept speaking, voice steady but charged with quiet history. You ever had someone tell you that you don't belong somewhere you built with your own hands? You'd remember the tone forever. Brick's jaw tightened. He muttered, no way. She met his disbelief with a single question. How many Reed & Co. diners you think there are across this city? He hesitated. 16, she said, including the one that delivers to your bar every Friday. You signed the catering invoice yourself. The realization hit like a crack of lightning. Vance looked at Brick, then back at her, face drained of colour. You own that Reed & Co.? Naomi's reply was surgical. I am that Reed & Co. For a long second, nobody spoke. The crowd had stopped murmuring. Even the police officers had gone still, watching her reclaim the moment molecule by molecule. Jordan stepped closer, holding out a tablet, its screen displaying the company's internal dashboard, live feed from security cameras, timestamps from Rico's video, and a digital signature across the bottom. Authorized N. Reed. Naomi nodded once. Submit the report. Brick swallowed hard. You didn't have to bring the cops into this. Naomi looked at him, voice low but unyielding. You brought them when you broke what I built. The officer beside her spoke softly, professional but reverent now. Ma'am, do you want to press charges? Naomi paused, eyes scanning the soaked, guilty faces in front of her, men who had no idea they'd just vandalized the empire of the woman they mocked. Not tonight, she said. Let them go. The court they'll face isn't in here. Vance looked confused. Then what's this supposed to mean? Naomi took a breath. It means next time you see a woman who looks like me, walking alone, dressed simple, not loud, you'll think twice before deciding she doesn't belong. The crowd erupted in a low wave of applause, not wild but heavy, full of relief, the kind that says justice happened. Rico whispered from the doorway, that line's going to break the internet. Danny murmured, no, it's going to fix something first. Naomi glanced at her phone, where messages from press outlets were already lighting up the screen. She turned it face down again. Let them write it, she said quietly. I already lived it. Brick lowered his head. Didn't know who you were. Naomi's answer came sharp but merciful. That's the problem. You saw colour, not character. And for the first time that night, he had nothing left to say. The street went still. Not quiet. Still. As if every sound had stepped back to make room for what hung in the air. Truth. Brick's hands dropped from his jacket pockets, the fight draining out of him like rain down a gutter. Vance's smirk had evaporated hours ago. Now his eyes darted from Naomi to the crowd, searching for a place to hide. There wasn't one. Phones still glowed around them, but no one spoke. Even the live-stream chat, thousands watching, had slowed to a crawl of disbelief. She owns it? No way, that's the same Reed & Co. chain in Chicago. He just picked the wrong woman. The rain eased into mist. Every face wore a version of the same expression, shame, awe, respect, or a strange combination of all three. Naomi stood in the doorway of the diner, light spilling behind her, hands folded in front like a verdict had already been read. Jordan stood beside her, silent, waiting. Rico held his phone low now, not to film, but to remember. The injured biker, Lenny, finally broke the silence, his voice cracked. You didn't have to help me after what they said. Naomi turned toward him. I don't do things because people deserve it. I do them because they're right. A murmur of assent rolled through the crowd. The officer nearest her looked down, nodding faintly, writing nothing. She understood this wasn't paperwork anymore. It was a moment. Brick took one step forward. Look, Miss Reed, I didn't know. Naomi didn't move. You didn't ask. That landed harder than any accusation. Vance rubbed his hands together nervously, muttering something about just a misunderstanding. Naomi's tone stayed level, almost gentle. A misunderstanding is when you get the wrong directions. This was a decision. Behind them, Rico whispered to Danny, "That's the clip. Right there." She nodded, tears pooling at the corners of her eyes. That's the part people will share. The air seemed to thicken with regret. The same men who had strutted across this pavement 15 minutes ago now looked like they were shrinking under the weight of their own echo. Naomi stepped down onto the sidewalk. The water rippled beneath her shoes. "You know what happens now?" she asked quietly. Brick hesitated. "You press charges?" She shook her head. "No, I let the footage speak. People learn slower when you yell. They learn faster when they watch." A car horn sounded from a block away, echoing down the wet street like an accidental drumbeat. Someone in the crowd started clapping, slow, uncertain, then joined by another and another. Not applause for spectacle, applause for restraint. Naomi didn't smile. She just inclined her head slightly, accepting not praise but closure. Lenny looked up at her again. "I owe you. You owe it forward," she said softly. "Next time you see someone getting pushed out, you stand where I'm standing." He nodded, wiping his face. "Yes, ma'am." The live stream count ticked higher, 10,000 watching, then 12. In comment sections around the world, people typed words like grace, justice, control. Brick finally spoke again, his voice stripped of bravado. "What happens to us?" Naomi glanced toward Jordan. He replied evenly, "Your names are logged. You'll get your consequences in writing." The crowd murmured. Vance swallowed, whispering, "We're done." Naomi answered without looking at him, "You were done when you forgot respect was free." And with that the silence settled again, not empty but full, the kind of silence that follows lessons too heavy for words. The officers stepped aside, the crowd began to thin, and in the soft glow of the diner's light, Naomi Reed stood unmoved, the storm behind her, the truth beside her, and the world, for once, finally listening. The rain had stopped, but the air still trembled with what had just unfolded. Streetlights hummed, the pavement steamed. It felt like the whole block was holding its breath, waiting to see how this woman would end it. Naomi Reed reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone again, the same small device that had turned humiliation into testimony. She didn't rush. Her every movement was deliberate, clean, final. "Jordan," she said softly, without looking up. "Yes, ma'am. Pull the South Line Riders account from our vendor registry." Jordan blinked. "Immediately?" She nodded. "Effective tonight. They're blacklisted from all Reed & Co. properties. No supply contracts, no catering, no events. Add a permanent security flag." Brick stepped forward. "Wait, you can't just—" Naomi met his gaze, cool and unwavering. "I can, and I just did." Vance let out a shaky laugh, part disbelief, part denial. "Lady, we don't need your fancy diners." Naomi's tone sharpened just slightly, a scalpel, not a shout. "You already do. Your bar runs on Reed distribution, the coffee, the produce, even the napkins." She turned the screen toward him, showing the digital invoice with his signature, dated last week. "You depended on what you disrespected." That shut him up. Jordan's voice came through again. "Registry updated. Access revoked across all systems." Naomi slipped the phone back into her coat. "Good." The officer beside her, still holding the business card, exhaled. "Ma'am, that's faster than court." Naomi's lips curved faintly. "That's the point." Rico whispered to Danny, "She doesn't yell. She deletes people." Danny murmured, awed, "That's what real power sounds like." Brick tried again, his tone suddenly pleading. "Miss Reed, look, it was a mistake." Naomi raised a hand, not in anger, but in finality. "A mistake is when you spill coffee. This was character." Her words landed with surgical precision. The crowd murmured softly, not cheering this time, but reverent, like a courtroom hearing its verdict. Naomi stepped closer to the men, rainwater dripping from the diner's awning onto her shoulders. "You'll get a legal notice tomorrow. Compensation for damages, reimbursement for repairs, and a personal letter from me." Vance scoffed nervously. "What's it going to say?" Her voice turned quiet, dangerous in its calm. "It'll say you're banned." The word hung in the air like a brand. Brick stared at the ground. "Guess that's it, then." Naomi tilted her head. "That's the lesson, not the end. I don't need to ruin you. Just let you live long enough to understand what respect costs." For a moment the street went still again. No thunder, no clapping, just the hum of realization. Then she turned to Jordan. "Make sure Rico gets a raise. And Danny, she'll manage the reopening team." Jordan smiled. already noted. Naomi looked back at the broken glass, at the letters of Marley's diner still glowing through the cracks. "Leave the sign as it is for a week," she said. "Let people see what arrogance looks like when it breaks." Jordan nodded. "And after that?" She glanced at him, calm, resolute. "We rebuild. We always do." She turned to the crowd one last time, eyes meeting the phones still recording. "Don't mistake kindness for weakness," she said. "Kindness is choice. Weakness is excuse." Then she stepped back into the diner, the door swinging shut behind her, the light framing her silhouette like the final shot of a film. The crowd stayed frozen for a few seconds longer, as if moving too soon would erase what they'd just witnessed. Justice hadn't shouted tonight. It had simply signed out of the system. Morning crept in slow, turning puddles into mirrors. The diner's neon flickered weakly, one letter still cracked but glowing stubbornly. Marley's. The name she built from nothing. Naomi Reed stood by the counter, hands wrapped around a fresh cup of coffee. The same cup that had hit the ground hours earlier now sat steaming again, proof that some things, once broken, could return stronger. Rico swept the last of the glass near the doorway. Danny reset the chairs. Outside, police tape fluttered softly in the breeze. The city was awake now, but quiet. Jordan stood near the window, tablet in hand. "Ma'am, overnight numbers, 12 million views across 3 platforms. Marley's Diner is trending worldwide." Naomi didn't look up. "Good. Maybe people will remember the message longer than the video." He nodded, then asked carefully, You sure about reopening today?" faintly. "Justice doesn't take days off." She stepped out onto the sidewalk. The rain had washed everything clean, except the stain of pride the bikers had left behind, but even that would fade with sun. Across the street, someone had laid flowers near the curb. Anonymous, white lilies, soaked but standing. A note beneath them read, "Thank you for staying calm when the world wouldn't." Naomi picked it up, eyes softening for the first time all night. "People notice more than they say," she murmured. Rico joined her at the door. "You really think they'll change, Miss Reed?" Naomi glanced at him. "No one changes overnight, but they remember moments like this, and remembering is the start." He nodded slowly. "I guess silence really does talk." She smiled, "only when it knows what to say." The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, the smell of coffee, the whisper of something ending and beginning all at once. Naomi turned to Jordan. "File the full report, then archive it." He hesitated. Under what title? She looked at the broken sign above her. "Control," she said, "because that's what they mistook for weakness." Jordan typed it in, then paused. "Ma'am, what about the interviews? The press wants a statement." Naomi turned toward the cameras that had gathered across the street, reporters waiting, microphones raised. For a moment it looked like she might step forward. Instead, she reached into her coat, handed her cup to Rico, and said quietly, "Let them tell the story. I've already written the ending." She walked toward her car, simple, black, unbranded, and as she opened the door, a reporter shouted, "Miss Reed, do you have anything to say to the men who tried to humiliate you?" Naomi paused, her reflection catching in the car window. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't turn around. She just said, clear enough for every mic to catch, "I don't need to film justice. I live it." The door closed with a soft click. The car pulled away, tires gliding through the last puddles of the night before. Behind her, Marley's Diner flickered fully back to life. The neon light burned bright, washing the street in gold. No longer a scene of chaos, but a monument to composure. Rico watched from the doorway, whispering to himself, she didn't just win, she reset the rules. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, not as warning, but as applause.